Hi, I'm Teolisi. Today we'll talk a bit about analyzing Forge Lines Forever game data. So let's start by jumping into an example, and afterwards we can talk a bit about where did we find this data. We're seeing a matrix of scatter plots, and every one of these plots, every dot represents the behavior of one player in one game. Since we're looking at ladder 1v1 games, all the valid games 2016 until May 2022, we'd expect every game to generate exactly two dots, right? Like one per player. The x-axis in each of these scatter plots represents the rating of the player at the beginning of the game. So the stronger players here, the weaker players over here, or in this case, say the stronger players here, the weaker players over there. And the y-axis in every scatter plot represents the some behavior, some measure of a behavior of the player in the game. So the actions per minute, the reclaim ratio, the ratio of reclaim commands being issued, and so on and so forth. The columns that the plots are organized by represent the size of the map. So this is 5 by 5, 10 by 10, and 20 by 20. And finally, the color of the dot. So say this blue dot here represents that the player was playing the Eon faction. So every color represents a certain faction. Let's look at what the data tells us, or maybe doesn't tell us. It seems pretty clear that there's a strong relationship between high APM and high ratings, right? Like, seems like it's pretty difficult to be at these very high levels of rating without also having high APM. Note that the actions that we count aren't really every action the player can do in the game. It's almost every action, but there's a concept called an issue command and a factory issue command. That's what you can tell a unit or tell a factory. And that includes practically everything like move, patrol, attack, reclaim, overcharge, transport, whatever, but doesn't include all sorts of like strange things like sending resources to another player and so on. Still, for these issue commands and factory issue commands, this trend around like APM and rating persists. Reclaim ratio shows us the ratio of issue commands that were of the reclaim type. This is specifically reclaim, so no patrol, no attack move, specifically like reclaiming and then pointing and clicking at reclaim available on the map. And again, the ratio of that relative to all commands. And again, we see kind of like a pretty strong relationship, maybe not as strong as before, but still pretty strong between use of reclaim, or like lots of use of reclaim, and stronger players. When looking at defense ratio, this is how often do we queue a defensive structure for construction. So defensive means it has the defense category turned on in the blueprint, and that covers things like point defense or shield or a wall, that kind of stuff. And the relationship here isn't as strong. If anything, I think we can see that especially in the smaller maps, the stronger players tend to build fewer defensive units, probably building more tanks. Overcharge ratio, I don't think we can see much here. Like doesn't I don't see a clear pattern here. Use of transport commands doesn't actually differentiate the player's rating so much, but does differentiate pretty clearly between the maps. So not very popular in 5 by 5, gets more popular 10 by 10, and practically essential in 20 by 20. And finally, if we look at the tech level mix between commands, again, we can see the differences between like levels, map sizes, and the mixes. I don't see a very strong pattern here. Maybe a bit here and a bit there, and so on. Notice that every time I talk about like tech level mix or queuing units for a building, I keep saying queuing for a building. That's because in the replay file, we can only see the commands the player issued. So I can see a player has queued a tank to be built. I don't know if the tank was actually built. And also a player might queue a single tank, but then activate the the factory repeat command and then get 1,000 tanks out of that. Still, from what I've seen, this is reasonably representative. Like you can still see meaningful mixes here of what do players queue. Let's look further into APM, right? Like I took a deeper look at Swokol, one of the strongest players in the 1v1 ladder. And let's look at their rating 2017 until 2022. Clearly, we can see sort of like a steady trend of improvement. The thickness of the line, the width of the line, represents how many games were played in a period. So we can see here playing more, then maybe playing a bit less, and then playing quite a bit again. Not sure if the data really supports it, but at least there's a nice story to be told here about like Swokl playing a bit less in this period and then their APM going down. But again, I think there's a pretty clear trend here showing how Swokl's APM improved as they were getting better. But I think there's more to the story. What we're seeing here is comparing the APM of two top rated players. I don't remember which one of them is above the other at the moment on the ladder, but you know they're both really high up there, and I'm not sure we can meaningfully tell which player is stronger. But let's have a look at the APM of Swokl and of ZLO during a game. So this is the APM at minute 0 of the games I've analyzed, a few hundreds or I think a few thousand games. Minute 1, minute 2, minute 3, and so on. The thickness of the line shows us how many games went into the analysis. Obviously, a lot more games reach minute 1 or minute 10, and way fewer games get all the way to minute 39. Probably someone has either won or lost here. This is not necessarily the games that Swokl played versus ZLO, just, you know, the games in which Swokl was playing or games in which ZLO was playing. What the data shows us is that even though there's a clear pattern where both of them are a bit more idle at the beginning, then they have like more activity at minute 1, minute 2, and then slowly activity goes down during the game. Maybe we can describe it as here the micro and the tactics are more important, and here you need to think more and the strategy becomes more important. It seems interesting that Swokl is consistently playing with lower APM than ZLO, and yet both of them are really strong players. Both of them show this trending line of like becoming slower as the game goes deeper, but especially for ZLO, the trend is much more pronounced, right? Like we can see a stronger difference here. I don't know, I think it's pretty cool stuff, and I think with this type of analysis, we can better understand the game and, you know, make ourselves better players, I hope. So what could you do with this kind of stuff? The first thing, and really my call to action in this video, would be that you would contribute some more ideas for things I could look at, right? Like we had a deep dive into APM and a bunch of other behaviors, but I've created this GitHub repository. So if you click here, you'll get to, you know, my name, FAF analysis. And in here, I did not yet put any meaningful analysis, right? Like it's basically empty with, you know, like a README showing the very basics of how I do these analyses. What I'd appreciate it if every one of you did, or I don't know if everyone, but anyone that is interested, go here and create an issue, right? Like create a bug or a ticket in this repository and give me ideas, right? Like tell me what sort of analysis you'd like to see in the future. I'll try to work on the you know, the analysis that you'll ask for or the analysis that get the most attention. Feel free to comment on other people's analysis ideas and so on and so forth. Super happy to look into that. Other than that, if you want to play with the data yourself, I've created a Data Studio dashboard at bit.ly/faf-data studio. If you go here, you won't have as rich access to the data as what I'm using to analyze, but still it's very easy. You can see here all the games, not just 1v1, played 2012 until May, or no, I think including June 2022 now. And you can kind of like slice the games. Let's look only at games that were played by a player that was playing for less than a year at the time the game began. So only the new players, right? Like this is the fresh blood kind of like going into the FAF community. And here we can see the breakdown, yeah, of the rating of these players. We can see the number of players in the game, like do new players play more like 8-player games or 2-player games, and so on and so forth, the factions they chose, and so on and so forth. We go to reset and we'll go back to the full data set. Note here we can drill down and see the data not year by year, but I think it goes to quarter by quarter and then month by month. Yeah, and then if you continue drilling down, you can get all the way to day by day, which days of the week are more popular, roughly as you'd expect the weekend, and which hours of the day are more popular, and so on and so forth. On this second page of the dashboard, you'll be able to see similar charts to what I've shown earlier, these scatter plots. Not quite as advanced because Data Studio just doesn't give me the same kind of capabilities as like other programs, but it's free and available online. And again, you can see here things like the APM or the use of transport units, and you can slice this by specific players. So here you'll be seeing the players sorted by their average rating in this data set. Ignore these two tests, they're just rubbish in the data. And here you can see the players by the number of games they've played. So you can say, for example, show me only the games by Coco, Alexander Berlin, and Darden, and you'll be able to see some data about them specifically. Other than this, you can also look on Kaggle. I don't know if you've heard about it, a community for data scientists, and I've published a subset of the data sets here. You can have a look, like query the data yourself, maybe do something cool. If you do, feel free to post it here as a notebook. And finally, I've exported everything I work with under the Fafalytics, that's the name of my project, and Fafladder 1v1 public BigQuery dataset. So if you're in GCP and if you know some SQL and know how to use BigQuery, I think this is like really the best way to interact with the data. If you go, to my BigQuery page, you can see some of the data I have here. So under Fafalytics, that's the project name. I've shared Faf. So here you have the history of all games, 11 million games, 5 gigabyte. And under Faf Ladder 1v1, you'll have the history of 1v1 games, so way fewer games. But in addition to the game metadata, where you can see the schema is just the metadata of the games, you also have the issue commands tables, which shows you all the commands issued during the game. This is how I've been doing the analyses you've seen, right? Like a lot more data here. Finally, you can play with the code, right? Like I made a custom project, like a toolkit to extract data from Faf servers. Let's not go through, the whole details, but it's basically a collection of utilities that allows you to scrape the metadata from Faf servers, to transform it and load it into BigQuery, and similarly to get the binary replay blobs, parse them using the fantastic parsers made by the community, and then again transform the data and upload into BigQuery. That's it in terms of what you can do. What are the next things for me to do? I'd like to do the analysis that I hope people will ask for. Again, Faf analysis. Go here and please create issues. Like if you have ideas for analysis, I'd love to look into them. I have my own ideas for more analyses, looking into other types of commands, not issue, looking into messages and so on. And I have some stuff I should do with the code, never mind the details. I think this is a pretty interesting area. Every command also has the coordinates on the map, and you can do some pretty cool visualizations this way, and you can really try to understand maps in different ways, but maybe that's something we could discuss in the next video. Folks, thanks so much. Until next time.